Hi all, I'm Cullen Haynes and welcome to Lawyer Lending Live. My next guest is a true powerhouse in every sense of the word, 7 years in financial planning and a very dear and close friend of mine. Could you please make very welcome the one, the only, the incomparable Robert Rich from Endorphin Wealth. How are you, Robert? What is happening, sir?
Cullen, good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me and for that very warm introduction. It's great to see you again. And I'm sorry I couldn't catch you when I was up in Sydney last week.
No, well, I'm over the COVID now. The old spicy cough, it is doing the rounds again. But nonetheless, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And a good segue into what you're going to be talking about in terms of life and enjoying it. And I would encourage people, it is now 12:16 on the 23rd. It's Wednesday. This is a live. We're beaming to LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook. Please, if you've got any burning questions for Robert, put them in the comments and we will do our best to address them in real time. But, first thing, what is happening in your circle of influence, Robert? Tell us.
Well, mate, it's been a really big year in the financial advice space. So I'm not sure if you've heard, but there's a little bit going on in the world at the moment. Markets are a little bit volatile, and so my phone has been ringing off the hook with about 100 families I look after on an ongoing basis around Australia. So a lot of people with a lot of questions because things are just not performing the way they normally do. Our CIO actually mentioned that this year that we're having is conditions like this haven't been seen in the last 100 years. You have to go back to 1929 to see when the market was behaving like this. So, of course, everything we learn in our financial advice textbook has been completely thrown out the window. But that's
Yes.
okay. We adapt and we learn and we keep our finger on the pulse and keep pushing ahead from that perspective. So it's been a very busy year. As I mentioned just before, it was great to pop up to Sydney last week, of course, and to crown the year with a little award from the IFA Excellence Awards, which are a pretty big deal.
Kudos, by the way.
So,
well
yeah,
done.
well, thank you so much. Oh, totally humbled by the honour and great to be recognised. So I was designated to be the Client Servicing Advisor of the Year, mate. So that's why I'm here and that's why I do what I do. So it's great to be recognised and just sets up a nice platform to build and to push off from next year as well.
Absolutely. It's a testament to the value you deliver. And I do want to see a LinkedIn post where it doesn't say #humble blessed. I just want to say I worked hard for this and Endorphin Wealth deserves it. So will you be the first one to do it? No pressure.
I'll do it straight after this live, Cullen. I'll dial in and I'll make it happen for you, mate.
Oh, fantastic. But look, we were chatting about what we were going to talk about. And I really love this whole idea, and maybe you can expand on it, is living life with purpose and on purpose. I'd love to start off. What does that actually mean? What's the difference? And how do you approach it in your own life in terms of living with purpose?
Yeah, that's right, mate. So it was. I think quite often that when people think, we're speaking with a financial advisor, or what do they do? We quite often find that people just expect, oh, great, we're going to go see this person. They're going to tell us how to save tax, and they're going to tell us about their wonderful diversified portfolio with all of these investment options, and isn't that going to be wonderful? But what I've actually found from my experience and what the clients actually relate to best and what people are actually seeking is a sense of fulfillment, right? And kind of what it tends to boil down to is this term purpose, right? And it's something that I think as human beings, we don't often think about as much as we should, right? Because, we only get one shot at it, mate. Like, this is it. And depending on how old you are, you're a percentage of the way through your life. So I've just hit 40 this year. So there's time.
25% through your life. Absolutely.
We'll see about that. We'll see how modern medicine goes. But I reckon if I'm that far through, it'd be pretty good. But yeah, mate, it's I think that people don't think about this stuff usually until it's too late, right? And because, of course, my client base ranges from people that are just getting started and are youthful and exuberant, all the way through to people that are approaching retirement and the ending of their career and transitioning out that way too. And usually I find that it's not until it's too late or there's been some kind of an illness or something's happened in their family where they're like, oh goodness, actually I haven't thought enough about this stuff. And I've been too busy in the day to day, working my job, raising my kids, whatever the case may be, and they haven't actually thought about it. So a big part of our process in going through with my clients is to really kind of articulate and to look at that, and to, and to go through that with clients and start thinking about, well, what's your purpose? What's important to you? And help them through that process of defining it.
Absolutely. And is there perhaps a leading question? Is there a real-time way that people can do this in their own life? Is there an experiment? Is there something they can
Yeah.
look at their life and actually implement in real time?
Absolutely, there is, mate, and this is a great thing I love to do with my clients when I first meet them, and actually set them this thought experiment. And it might be a useful thing perhaps for your fan base to be thinking about over the weekend, or maybe when they're driving in their car listening to this podcast at a later date. But I get my clients to put themselves in the mindset of perhaps if I can give them maybe a briefcase with $10 million. And well, maybe $10 million isn't going to cut it up in Sydney. I guess $10 million, maybe you could afford a cardboard box under a bridge or something up there. But let's say $100 million, right? So a large sum of money. And I want my clients to be thinking about, well, if money didn't matter anymore, right? If they had all the wealth that they needed, if they weren't stressed about money, if they didn't have to work, if work was actually optional for them at this point in time, what would they do with their lives? What would motivate them to get up on a Monday morning and be like, yes, I'm excited to get up. I'm excited to live this life. And I find that going through this process can be quite, well, exhilarating for a lot of clients. Of course, people that are just growing and just getting started, actually they go, oh my goodness, well, actually, if money didn't matter anymore, then I'd dedicate my life to other causes or other, of course, yeah, they'd say, oh, well, I'd buy a big house and I'd, drive a fancy car and all that stuff. I'm not interested in any of that. It's much more a case of, well, what would you do with your time here on Earth, and why would you go about your life? So what's really good about that is it can help people start to plan and start to think about that. And what's great, and this worked for my wife and I actually, is if you have that clearly defined goal of where you want to get to, what you want to do, where you want to land as your end game, then that can be extremely motivating at the start of your journey, right? You can be like, well, gosh, if that's our ideal life at the end, when we turn 50 or 55 or 60 or whatever the case may be, then how do our actions today influence where we're actually going to land in the future? And it can really help couples, work together, to hold hands, to collaborate, and to work towards a common goal, which can be really beneficial for the relationship.
I'm endeared by what you're saying there, Robert. And is the whole, let me put it this way, I don't want to put words in your mouth, is the whole idea that work is to become somewhat optional, and that your passion and purpose is really the key driver for your life?
Well, yeah, and it's an interesting concept, because I know a lot of your fan base and a lot of your clients, obviously lawyers, right, and barristers, and these people are highly educated. They've spent their whole lives and careers just digesting more and more knowledge every day, every week. And the thought of retirement, that big R word, can be literally terrifying to people that aren't done yet and get so much satisfaction out of their role and out of being challenged on a daily basis and pushing ahead with cases and having their grey matter active. So we prefer to use this phrase, the date at which work becomes optional, because then, of course, that leaves the door open, that if you're enjoying your career, if you're truly loving what you're doing, if you're passionate about it, then by all means push ahead. Like, the happiness is the number one driver here. But as I can often find, Cullen, some of my clients, they come and see me and they complain a bit about old Sally in the accounts department, or they complain about their manager or the new person in at work, and they're grumbling, right? And they begrudgingly are going to work every day. But so this whole idea of this thought experiment of, well, if work was optional for you and you could actually stop work today and hand in your resignation letter, then what would you do with your life and how would you fill your days? And so that effectively, by the time you get to maybe your 100th birthday or whatever the case may be, and you're looking back on your life, you want to be thinking about, well, do I have any regrets? Is there things I wish I could have done, but I didn't know I could? And so, yeah, then through the financial advice process, of course, we're able to kind of calculate and demonstrate to our clients and say, well, hey, if these are all the things you want to do, then this is how the money's going to make it happen. And this is all completely viable for you. And it can be a really powerful exercise for people to go through.
And that experiment, it can be quite daunting for people because it really opens up, what would I do? And that's a scary thought, because people are maybe clinging to their job. On the other side, I've got clients like you mentioned, leading barristers and partners that do love what they do, and especially more the barrister side of things because they're self-employed. They want to keep on practicing until the very last day, it seems.
Fantastic, great.
Do you think that's a bad thing as a
Not
goal?
at all. No, mate. This life that we're living, it's not a game to become the wealthiest people in the cemetery, right? And it's not a big game to drive the most expensive cars or to have all the things, right? The goal here is to just be happy and to love your life and to love the relationships you have with the people around you. So if my clients are happy, then that's the path we're going down, right? But if they're unhappy, then this is when we need to change tact, right? And it stands to reason.
Good point. And I want to circle back to the second thing we talked about at the start. There's living with purpose. But what does it mean to live on purpose? Because, pardon my ignorance, I didn't know there was a difference.
Well, yeah, certainly. So I suppose so living with purpose is to kind of have that vision and that dream about, what is my purpose in life? What am I doing? But to live more life on purpose might be, it's more about kind of taking control of the situation, I think, Cullen. It's a case of not sticking your head in the sand, not just assuming that everything's going to be okay, not just, bumbling along, doing the same thing week after week, year after year, and expecting your life to miraculously become better or different in any way. So living life on purpose, this is another important part of our process. And it's a lot more about bringing some discipline, bringing some structure, bringing some focus to the clients to say, well, hey guys, your behavior, you're going in a certain manner here. We can see how you're tracking and how you're trending, but there's no one holding you accountable here, right? And so I quite often find that I'm a good accountability buddy for my clients, Cullen. I can be a good cop when I need to, but I can be a bad cop as well, right? And I can make sure that we highlight the reality of the situation, right? And people are only just kidding themselves if they just pretend like, oh, I'm not going to look at my credit card statement. I'm not actually going to pay any attention to it, but I'm just going to keep buying and spending on whatever I want. Well, then that might cause problems for them moving forward. So yeah, around that accountability piece is really big in my field. And for my clients, I think they really relate to being able to have almost like an independent kind of third party, I guess, to either themselves if they're a single person or in a couple, because as we quite often find in a couple, of course, there'll be opposing views, Cullen, where one member perhaps thinks that there's a certain way to go about things and the other might tend to disagree. And so I can act as a mediator or a bit of a financial therapist, really, to help, negotiate these conversations and to help move forward, really. That's what it's really about. And by paying attention to things and having that real structure and focus and clarity, then that can create a really great atmosphere for the family or for the household to really improve and move forward.
It seems that you and the team there, Robert, look at things very differently. I'd be curious to know, with the recent collapse of the third largest crypto exchange, was your firm ever advocating that kind of investment to their clients? And did it worry some of your clients that had happened? Or obviously that's not really your remit?
Well, yeah, it's interesting actually because, I guess legally speaking, if you like, under my license, so I'm actually not able to recommend my clients specifically go and buy cryptocurrency. It's actually,
Interesting.
yeah, so it's specifically kind of excluded from, I guess, the day to day and recommendations for our clients. But having said that, of course, we are familiar with the investment, with the asset class, with how it works, with the potential volatility that can be seen at times within the asset class as we're seeing. And it's not to say that we don't say, no, clients, you can't have that, but it's more about educating them about the risks, right? And getting this more in alignment with the clients and how they feel, and their attitudes towards risk. Because certainly, Cullen, some clients come to us and they have some what you'd call almost play money or pocket money, right? Where they just say, oh, look, I might have $5,000 or $50,000 or whatever it is that's completely surplus to our actual household wealth requirements, right? So it's kind of spare money and they're willing to have a dabble or have a bit of a gamble or be a bit more speculative with that slither, that portion of their wealth. And so to that extent, of course, we will monitor it for them. We will help them keep an eye on it. We'll continue to have conversations around, is this still an appropriate asset class moving forward? How do you feel about this? What are we thinking is likely to happen in the future? But it's all about balancing out and having that deep understanding of the clients and thinking, well, how will they feel if this investment option tanks? Like, based on a
Yes.
worst case scenario, will that upset the apple cart, or will life go on? And will they say, oh, that's okay, it's merely a scratch, we can just pop a band-aid on that, no problems at all. But of course, I'd be expressing grave concerns if clients were suggesting that a large portion of their actual real wealth should be allocated to this type of an asset class, because it can have some pretty devastating effects.
Of course, of course. And I think that goes back to what we were talking about earlier, having structure and focus, and knowing and how to assemble something and actually sticking to that plan and focusing rather than getting distracted by the pretty lights and the noise and the FOMO and all that kind of thing. You're hearing it by them in the media. I should get onto this. Yeah, I'd love to explore that structure and focus more with you.
Oh, mate, absolutely. And what's really interesting is, and I've been in the game for 6 or 7 years now, and so I've heard quite a bit. And it feels like every week a different family will call me up and they'll say, Robert, what do you know about investing in pink diamonds? And I'll say, not a great deal. It may surprise you that there wasn't a chapter on pink diamonds in the financial advice textbook. However, of course, I can I can do some research and start to understand what it is and how it works, and if an investment in that may be appropriate. Similarly, there's spruikers online, there's people at the barbecue, there's a lot of outside influences on my clients. Goodness me, investing in sandalwood plantations in Malaysia. Like, my goodness,
Who
did
knew?
you know there was such a thing? And apparently you can invest your money, and after 5 years, they plant these sandalwood trees, and apparently they harvest it, and apparently there's some form of a return at the end. But important to note, Cullen, this is something I learned, that their neighbor kind of rival farmers will actually get their chainsaws out and be jumping the fence to chop down their opposing trees to drive up the prices. So I think
I didn't
again,
know
it's in
that.
that, mate. It's in that speculation territory, right? And not something that I feel very comfortable with, even for my clients to have a little dabble in. So I think you're right. Being available 24/7 to my clients is something that I pride myself on. It's just being very hands-on, Cullen. And my clients, they have my phone, they call my number, they get me, I pick up the phone and they say, hey Rob, someone at the barbecue was talking about this and that. What do you think? And then I can usually pretty easily have a quick conversation with them, and they say, oh, okay, beauty, got it, thanks so much, talk to you soon, kind of thing. And that can be great. So it can really help them avoid getting distracted. But then I would also say on a larger scale as well, it's important to keep your finger on the pulse with these things. So for the clients that I'm working with on an ongoing basis, it's regular check-ins, it's planned, it's determined. We bring out the plan again and say, right, guys, how are we tracking? Are we making, positive steps towards doing these things we want to do? Or have we had a terrible year, and we've stagnated, and why has that happened, and what can we be doing next year to kind of adjust and pivot to making sure that we're continually improving and continually getting better from a financial perspective, and I guess from that level, almost like a personal trainer of sorts, but for your wealth, I guess, to kind of make sure that we hold them accountable, and that they have the discipline to actually get the improvements that we know that they want, but sometimes clients just need a little nudge every now and again.
Just need a little bit of a nudge out the door. And discipline, I think, is also a very important element to the whole recipe for your wealth success. What does discipline mean to Robert Rich?
Yeah, mate. Well, look, I think for discipline, the way I like to speak to my clients about discipline is we say that there's kind of two types of decisions that we can make as part of our process, right? We can make the optimal financial decisions. So that might mean, with the goal of having as much money as possible, making strictly the best financial decisions. But to do that, then you probably need to take a lot of risk. You probably need to get uncomfortable. You might need to pick up a second job on weekends. You might need to just have steamed rice for dinner. And if you have a fancy car,
mee goreng noodles. Yep.
That's right. But that's financial, financially optimized, you would say, right? So it sounds good to make as much money as possible, but actually there's costs to doing that. So there's these financial decisions, but then also, there's these lifestyle decisions as well, mate. So we're trying to help clients to find these balance, because I don't want my clients working 3 jobs. I don't want them hating their life. I don't want them having these noodles for dinner every night, right? Where's the fun in that? So instead, I much prefer to help them to not be too high one or the other, right? Not to be too focused on the lifestyle to the detriment of their financial position. But similarly, I don't want them to be too focused on the financial decisions to the detriment of their actual lifestyle and the enjoyment of their life. So certainly our process in going through it can help articulate and to help clients kind of work through and to find that balance where they're actually comfortable, they're getting the holidays that they need, they work really hard, they push, they deserve to have nice things in their life, no problems at all. But there needs to be a balance there and an understanding that if they have too much of the nice stuff, then it may mean that they need to make other sacrifices down the road, or perhaps work another 3 or 5 years longer than they had intended, because they just don't have those options available to them.
So it's that delayed gratification then.
Exactly, Cullen. It can be a really, really helpful thing. I'm sure you're familiar with how like compound interest works, right? And compound growth, and we see that any small changes in the short term can actually extrapolate out to really significant changes over the long term. So I'm always at pains to explain to my clients that, hey, making these small, tiny sacrifices at the moment, let me show you what that's actually going to turn into in 10 or 20 years' time. And
makes sense.
Because, of course, people aren't taught these things at school, Cullen. It's up to you and me in our respective fields to kind of educate these wonderful people that come to us and say, well, this is what it can actually mean to you. And then they can make an informed decision, of course, about the best way to move forward and what they're willing to forego versus the end goal and their eventual happiness. Yeah.
No, it's very much short-term pain, long-term gain, and not underestimating the power of little atomic shifts or atomic habits you can do now, that'll your future self, 10, 20, 30, 40 years time, will be thank you, Robert, for making those decisions back in the day. I really appreciate that.
That's the plan, Cullen. And from my own personal experience, I'm sure you can share the same, or any of us that have, parents that bought their home 40 years ago, those stretches and those small sacrifices they made, 20, 30, 40 years ago are certainly reaping significant benefits today as if they look back and say, wow, that was a great decision. So yeah, it's just, again, it's about illustrating, it's educating, it's mentoring, it's kind of bringing this control back to our clients so that they have real comfort and clarity about where they're up to, what their plans are, and then they can get excited about their life moving forward.
Some things to think about, legal audience watching and those at home too. I usually ask this question to my Law Live Bet guests, but I'd love to ask you, because you've been so candid and honest, Robert, when all is said and done, and you leave this mortal coil, touch wood, hopefully it's later rather than sooner, how would you like to be remembered?
Yeah, well, it's funny actually. I think about this quite a bit. In my role, as a most trusted kind of advisor, working so closely with these families, working with intergenerational wealth, I'm confronted by these thoughts quite a bit. And for me, and for my wife, actually, well, it's I would love the idea of having 10,000 people at my funeral. Like, that might sound completely nuts to a lot of people. They're like, oh my goodness, what's so special, or why would you even want that? And for me, mate, it's about touching people's lives, and it's about meeting with them, helping them, getting them into a better position, so that then they look upon me fondly and like, wow, so glad that person, that Robert, was part of my life, that he kind of helped me, and I want to remember him and pay my respects at the end. So that's my drive, man, is thinking about it may sound a bit macabre for lunchtime on a Wednesday, but maybe we need a glass of whiskey or something in our hands to really get to this philosophical kind of level. But when it's all said and done, mate, I feel very fortunate to have this financial literacy and this financial education. I understand how the system works, right? I get it very clearly. I went to do higher levels of study even to refine the more complex strategies that don't even apply to 99% of the families around Australia. But it sticks with me that people aren't taught this at school, mate. And I think it's just completely unfair that this level of financial literacy, and I often say it feels like we're playing a big game of Monopoly, all of us around Australia, but only some people know the actual rules of the game. And there's a lot of people that just don't know how this game's to be played, don't know what negative gearing is, don't know how to maximize tax deductions, don't know, all of these concepts, right, that I know and understand quite clearly. I'm sure you do too. And I just think it's terribly unfair. So I'm on a mission, man. I want to get 10,000 to my funeral, and I'm not going to rest until I've got all those RSVPs in the bank.
I love that. It reminds me of that story that Wayne Dyer talks about. If only people realized from the day they were born that they were dying, maybe they'd live a life worth living. And I think you're already well on your way, not only to get more than 10,000 followers on LinkedIn, but 10,000 people at your funeral. That's what I want to see there, Robert. You're making an impact. And I'm very honored to not have you as a colleague, but have you as a friend as well. And I really appreciate you joining us today.
You're very welcome, Cullen. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure. And where can people find you? Where are you hanging out most? Is it LinkedIn? Where can people get you, mon ami?
Yeah, LinkedIn's to be best, of course. Just do a search there for Robert Rich, financial advisor. And yes, before anyone starts making jokes, I'm blindingly aware of my surname and how it relates to the sector that I'm working in. And I understand that it's very appropriate, and I can assure you it's certainly not a stage name. So this is legit how I was born, and here I am in this field advising people and helping them manage their wealth. So it's a joy. So yeah, LinkedIn would be best, mate, and of course, happy to answer any questions or that people may have off the back of this.
Absolutely. Stay who you are, and your name is perfect. If you're Robert Poor, I don't think you do as well. So stay Robert Rich, connect with this powerhouse all, and thank you so much for tuning in to Lawyer Lending Live. Take care, everyone. Happy Wednesday.